There are certain nights when the human soul becomes completely still, not because care has faded away, but because it is resting in the quiet, hoping not to be misunderstood by the world. And if these words happen to reach you today, perhaps a part of you is already weary from pretending you no longer feel anything, while another part still secretly hopes someone out there is holding on to you just as tightly. Because the truth is, someone cares for you more deeply than you realize. It is not in the loud, dramatic way movies often show affection. It does not come through perfect timing or flawless words, but through hesitation, through emotional confusion, and through a distance that hides fear instead of a lack of interest. Before you convince yourself to walk away forever, you need to understand something most people discover far too late. Some hearts do not stop loving you when they become silent. Sometimes silence is simply the final defense of a soul terrified of losing what it cannot fully express. Human beings are strange when it comes to deep connection, especially when that connection becomes real. We spend our entire lives believing we want deep closeness. Yet the moment someone truly touches the hidden parts of us, fear begins to awaken. Carl Jung once spoke about the unconscious mind like a hidden ocean beneath human behavior. When someone genuinely cares for you, they do not merely touch your surface personality, they accidentally awaken the abandoned pieces buried deep underneath it. This message is about the reality of silent love, touching upon your insecurities, your unmet needs, your loneliness, and your longing to finally be chosen without conditions. That kind of connection changes people. It shakes them internally. It exposes emotional wounds they spent years hiding from themselves. This is why someone can deeply care for you and still pull away at the exact moment you need reassurance the most. It feels contradictory, but psychologically, it makes perfect sense. Love is not only warmth. Love is exposure. Love is vulnerability. It means standing entirely exposed in front of another human being, hoping they will not use your tenderness against you. Many people were never taught how to survive emotional intimacy. They learned how to survive disappointment. They learned how to appear strong. They learned how to suppress emotions, but they never learned how to safely receive care without fear. So when this person became emotionally attached to you, something inside them began changing in ways they could not fully explain. Your presence started affecting their emotional state. Your silence suddenly mattered. Your attention became emotionally regulating. Your absence became heavier than they expected, and that terrified them. Once someone gains the power to emotionally affect your inner world, your subconscious immediately recognizes risk. Suddenly losing them becomes possible. Suddenly, abandonment feels imaginable again. Suddenly, your carefully protected independence no longer feels safe. Many people confuse emotional distance with a lack of care. But often, emotional distance is actually evidence of emotional overwhelm. There are people who become cold because they do not care, and there are others who become distant because they care too much. The second type is much harder to understand because their behavior contradicts their emotions. Their heart moves toward you while their fear pulls them away. One part of them wants closeness, while another part wonders if this will end the way everything else ended. Without realizing it, they begin protecting themselves from pain that has not even happened yet. Maybe you have already felt this contradiction yourself. You might notice the strange inconsistency, the emotional warmth followed by sudden silence, and the way they look at you when they think you are not paying attention. You see it in the way they remember small things about you without effort, and the emotional tension that exists even in ordinary conversations. And yet something still feels blocked, like something is left unfinished. It is almost as if their soul keeps leaning toward you while their mind keeps stepping backward. This is what unresolved emotional wounds often look like. People imagine trauma as dramatic destruction. But most emotional wounds are quieter than that. They hide inside attachment patterns, inside the fear of vulnerability, and inside emotional withdrawal. Some people disappear emotionally the moment they start caring deeply because closeness unconsciously reminds them of pain they never healed from. Perhaps they once cared for someone who abandoned them. Perhaps they learned as children that emotional expression led to rejection. Perhaps vulnerability once humiliated them so deeply that now their nervous system treats intimacy as danger. The heartbreaking part is this. They may not even consciously understand why they are acting this way. The subconscious mind controls far more behavior than people realize. It is common to hold on to someone who went quiet, feeling that they still care, because a person can genuinely love you while simultaneously sabotaging the connection. This happens because internally their nervous system associates closeness with emotional risk. They want closeness, but closeness activates fear. They crave intimacy, but intimacy awakens vulnerability. So they begin sending mixed signals without even understanding themselves. This is why emotionally mature connection requires patience far more than passion. Passion is easy. Anyone can desire someone intensely for a moment. But true connection asks something much harder from human beings. It asks them to remove emotional armor piece by piece. It asks them to trust again after disappointment. It asks them to remain emotionally open despite uncertainty. For many people, that process feels terrifying because they have spent years building identities around emotional self-protection. You must also understand something important about silence. Silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is emotional processing happening beneath the surface. Some people speak their emotions immediately. Others disappear inwardly when emotions become too strong. They retreat into thought, into confusion, and into internal conflict. This is especially true for people who have spent their lives suppressing vulnerability. Their silence is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is emotional survival, but this creates painful misunderstandings in relationships. One person interprets silence as rejection, while the other experiences silence as protection. One feels abandoned, while the other feels emotionally overwhelmed. Slowly, two people who deeply care for each other begin drifting apart. This does not happen because care disappeared, but because fear became louder than communication. This is where many people give up too early. They mistake emotional complexity for emotional absence. They assume connection should always look obvious, consistent, and easy. But psychologically profound connections are rarely simple. They activate the deepest layers of human identity. They force people to confront their shadow selves, which are the insecure, wounded, frightened parts hidden beneath confidence and pride. Carl Jung believed that real connection often becomes a mirror. It is not just a source of comfort, but a reflection of the unresolved self. This is why certain connections feel spiritually intense. They force an emotional awakening. They reveal patterns you never noticed before. They expose your fear of abandonment, your tendency to overgive, your fear of being unworthy, your desperate need for reassurance, and your hidden loneliness. Suddenly, another human being unknowingly becomes connected to parts of your identity you did not realize were still wounded. This person may be experiencing the exact same internal chaos right now. They might be sitting in the quiet, fighting a battle between their desire to be near you and their instinct to protect themselves from pain. When you look at them, you might see an emotional wall, but behind that wall is a person trying to process feelings that are too large for them to handle. They are navigating an internal maze where every turn brings them closer to you, but also closer to the fears they have spent a lifetime avoiding. It is important to remember that healing is not a linear journey. People do not simply decide to overcome their fears and suddenly become perfect partners. It takes time to unlearn the defense mechanisms that kept them safe in the past. When someone has survived by being independent and guarded, letting someone in feels like tearing down the very walls that kept them alive. If you find yourself waiting in the silence, remember that your patience is a form of care that speaks louder than words. It shows that you are willing to see past the confusion and the distance to the person underneath. It shows that you understand that their retreat is not a rejection of you, but a struggle with themselves. At the same time, this quiet space allows you to reflect on your own needs and boundaries. It gives you the chance to understand why this connection matters so much to you and what it is revealing about your own inner world. True closeness is not about two perfect people coming together, but about two flawed individuals who are willing to navigate the messy, frightening, and beautiful process of becoming vulnerable together. So if the silence feels heavy today, Let it be a space of understanding rather than anxiety. Recognize the hidden depth in the hesitation and know that sometimes the most profound connections are the ones that require us to wait quietly while the heart finds its courage. They may lie awake at night replaying conversations with you while pretending during the day that everything is normal. They may fight the urge to message you because emotional pride keeps interfering. They may miss you deeply while convincing themselves that distance is necessary. Perhaps the saddest part of human psychology is this. People often hurt the ones they love most because those are the only people capable of truly hurting them back. That realization changes everything when you begin seeing people through a psychological lens instead of a purely emotional one. Suddenly, you stop interpreting every confusing behavior as a lack of love. You begin recognizing emotional defense mechanisms hidden beneath actions. You see it in the delayed replies, the emotional inconsistency, the moments of withdrawal after intimacy, and the fear hidden inside emotional restraint. None of these behaviors are healthy when left unresolved, but they are deeply human. Maybe this is the painful truth your soul needed to hear today. Not every emotionally distant person is emotionally empty. Some are simply emotionally exhausted from surviving life with a guarded heart. There are people walking around carrying years of silent grief that nobody ever noticed. These are people who learned to appear emotionally independent because depending on others once destroyed them. They are people who secretly crave tenderness but panic the moment they receive it consistently. They have forgotten how to trust calm love because chaos became familiar to them. If this person truly loves you, their internal battle may be much deeper than you can currently see. But there is another side to this truth that you must not ignore. Love alone is not enough without emotional growth. You cannot save someone from their own unconscious patterns if they refuse to confront themselves. You cannot endlessly sacrifice your emotional well-being, hoping your love will heal another person's fear. Real connection requires mutual emotional responsibility. Compassion matters, but so does self-respect. Understanding someone's wounds should never require abandoning your own emotional needs entirely. This is where emotional maturity becomes essential. Emotionally mature love does not beg for crumbs. It does not destroy itself trying to prove worthiness. It does not chase endlessly while neglecting dignity. Mature love understands patience without self-abandonment. It creates space without disappearing emotionally. It allows compassion without losing boundaries. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not forcing a connection, but allowing someone the emotional space to confront themselves honestly. Transformation cannot be controlled from the outside. A person changes only when their soul becomes tired of repeating the same emotional cycles. Perhaps this connection entered your life not only to give you love, but to awaken you psychologically. It may have come to teach you the difference between attachment and genuine emotional alignment. It can show you how deeply you crave emotional reciprocity. It can force you to confront the ways you have ignored your own intuition out of fear of losing someone. Think carefully about this. Have there been moments when your intuition quietly whispered the truth long before your mind accepted it? Have there been moments where you sensed their feelings beneath their words? Human beings are far more intuitive than they realize. The subconscious constantly reads emotional energy, body language, emotional shifts, silence patterns, eye contact, and nervous tension. Long before logic catches up, the soul often already knows. That is why certain people remain emotionally unforgettable. They are memorable not because they were perfect, but because they emotionally awakened something sleeping inside you. Awakening is rarely comfortable. Sometimes awakening arrives through longing, through confusion, and through emotional distance that forces inner reflection. It can come through missing someone so deeply that you finally confront the loneliness you were hiding from. Pain has a strange psychological function. It strips away illusions. It exposes emotional truth. It reveals exactly where healing is still needed. This is why some relationships completely transform your inner world even when they never become fully stable externally. They force growth, they force awareness, and they force emotional evolution. Perhaps this person is currently standing at the edge of that transformation themselves. Maybe they are slowly realizing that emotional avoidance no longer protects them the way it once did. Maybe your absence has forced them to confront feelings they tried suppressing. Maybe they are beginning to understand that real love cannot survive forever inside silence and pride. Eventually, every human being reaches a moment where loneliness becomes heavier than vulnerability. When that moment arrives, people begin changing. They do not change instantly or perfectly, but they change gradually. They begin recognizing the emotional walls they built around themselves. They start noticing how often fear controlled their decisions. They realize how many opportunities for genuine connection they sabotaged, trying to protect themselves from pain. For the first time, they begin understanding that emotional safety cannot exist without emotional openness. This realization is life-changing. But while they navigate their own awakening, you must continue navigating yours. Do not allow uncertainty to destroy your sense of self-worth. Do not let another person's emotional confusion convince you that you are difficult to love. The way someone responds to intimacy often reflects their relationship with themselves far more than your value as a human being. Many emotionally unavailable people are not withholding love because you are unworthy. They are withholding because they themselves are terrified. They are terrified of needing someone, terrified of emotional dependency, terrified of rejection, terrified of losing control, and terrified of being emotionally seen too clearly. Ironically, the more deeply they love, the more vulnerable they feel. This creates a massive internal contradiction. They crave closeness while resisting it simultaneously. Unless they consciously heal, they remain trapped between desire and fear. But you cannot carry the emotional burden for both souls. You can love someone deeply and still choose emotional balance. You can understand someone psychologically without excusing endless emotional inconsistency. Compassion should never become self-destruction. This is one of the most important lessons emotionally awakened people eventually learn. Love should expand your spirit, not slowly erase it. Yet, despite all this complexity, there are still connections worth fighting for. There are rare connections where two souls gradually learn each other's fears with tenderness instead of judgment. There are connections where emotional walls slowly soften over time and where both people choose healing instead of ego. These relationships do exist, but they require honesty, accountability, vulnerability, patience, and emotional courage. Most importantly, they require two people willing to stop running from themselves. Every relationship eventually becomes a confrontation with the self. You cannot truly love another person while remaining completely disconnected from your own emotional truth. That is why shadow work matters. Shadow work is not simply spiritual language. Psychologically, it means facing the hidden parts of yourself honestly. It means looking at the jealousy you deny, the fear you hide, the loneliness you distract yourself from, the emotional patterns you repeat unconsciously, and the wounds you pretend no longer affect you. Until people confront these hidden layers, relationships continue repeating the same pain in different forms. Perhaps this person is finally beginning to face their shadow because of you. Perhaps your love became too real to ignore, too emotionally honest, and too psychologically awakening. Even if they have not fully figured themselves out yet, something inside them knows your connection matters. Human beings do not emotionally struggle this deeply over people who mean nothing to them. Real emotional conflict only exists where genuine attachment exists. That is why indifference feels cold and simple while love feels complicated and emotionally alive. If someone truly does not care, their energy becomes emotionally flat. But when someone deeply loves you while battling inner fear, their energy becomes inconsistent, emotionally charged, confusing, and intense. You feel their internal conflict even when words are entirely absent. You have probably already sensed this. You have felt the emotional pull, the unfinished feeling, and the strange intuitive knowing that beneath all the silence, something real still exists. Maybe you have questioned yourself repeatedly because of it. Maybe part of you keeps wondering if you are simply imagining things. But deep emotional intuition rarely appears without reason. The human subconscious constantly perceives emotional truths hidden beneath surface behavior. Still, intuition must be balanced with wisdom. We must not romanticize emotional suffering endlessly. Do not become addicted to emotional uncertainty simply because intensity feels meaningful. Some people stay trapped in painful dynamics because emotional unpredictability creates a powerful psychological addiction. The nervous system becomes attached to the constant emotional highs and lows. Calm love can initially feel unfamiliar or even boring after a chaotic attachment. This is why healing changes attraction. Emotionally healed people no longer chase emotional confusion to feel alive. They begin valuing consistency, emotional safety, honesty, and peace. They stop interpreting emotional unavailability as depth. They stop trying to earn love through suffering. Perhaps this entire experience is slowly guiding you toward that realization too. Sometimes the universe does not send someone into your life merely to complete you. Sometimes it sends them to transform you, to awaken your standards, to strengthen your emotional awareness, and to teach you that your heart deserves reciprocity, not emotional guessing games forever. At the same time, transformation takes time for everyone involved. If this person truly loves you, they may currently be fighting battles inside themselves that nobody else can see. They are fighting battles between old wounds and new hope, between fear and desire, and between self-protection and emotional surrender. Maybe right now they are standing alone somewhere, replaying your voice in their mind, wondering whether it is too late to reach for you honestly. The human heart carries regret more heavily than it carries rejection. Many people would rather avoid vulnerability temporarily than risk losing someone forever, until one day they realize silence itself became the reason they lost them. Do not underestimate how deeply people can feel emotions they struggle to express outwardly. Some of the deepest love stories are completely hidden beneath restrained behavior. Restraint is not ideal, but human beings are emotionally imperfect creatures. They are trying to survive their own histories while longing to be loved fully anyway. That is what makes love both beautiful and tragic. It brings together two wounded souls trying to trust each other while carrying invisible emotional scars. When the night grows quiet, the weight of everything unsaid can become overwhelming. The mind tries to build logical walls, but the heart refuses to follow orders. It remembers the warmth, the connection, and the moments where the masks slipped away completely. Even if miles of distance or walls of silence stand between you, the emotional imprint remains unchanged. True healing begins when we stop fighting the reality of our feelings and start allowing ourselves to simply experience them without fear.